Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and will give to your offspring all these lands. And in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, and in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed.
The Bible is a unified narrative, but the very idea of it being a united narrative infers that the stories of the Bible were at one time separate, individual stories that were not united. The question of this video is, how was it unified? Why was it unified? And what might we have missed in its unification? Abraham was called by God to go from his country, kindred, and his father's house to an unknown land that God would show him. God was going to make Abraham a great nation, and through him all the families of the earth would be blessed. This promise would pass to Isaac, and once again the promise to bless all the nations would be given. This promise would then pass to Jacob. Jacob's name would become Israel, and he would go on to have 12 sons. Nearing the end of his life and being ill, Jacob would speak the blessings of God over the sons of Joseph, Manasseh, and Ephraim. While Manasseh was the oldest, it is Ephraim that would receive the birthright from Jacob. Genesis 48:17-19. When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he took his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, "Not this way, my father. Since this one is the firstborn, put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations." Jacob had 12 sons, of which he would speak final words. Judah would rule until Shiloh comes, but it is Ephraim that would receive the birthright and go on to be the multitude of nations. Though these words of blessing would eventually go on to mean very little in the Bible, Judah would become strong and take over. 1 Chronicles 5:1-2. The sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel. For he was the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's couch, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the sons of Israel, so that he could not be enrolled as the oldest son. Though Judah became strong among his brothers, and a chief came from him, yet the birthright belonged to Joseph. Not only would Judah rule, but the Bible claims that Ephraim lost his birthright. Psalm 78:67-68. He rejected the tent of Joseph. He did not choose the tribe of Ephraim, but he chose the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion, which he loves. But then Jeremiah would contradict the psalm. Jeremiah 31:9. With weeping they shall come, and with pleas of mercy I will lead them back. I will make them walk by brooks of water, in a straight path in which they shall not stumble. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. The Messiah was supposed to come through the one with the birthright. But it gets even messier when we consider that David's line was cursed by God in the days of King Josiah's son. Jeremiah 22:30. Thus says the Lord, write this man down as childless, a man who shall not succeed in his days. For none of his offspring shall succeed in sitting on the throne of David and ruling again in Judah. In my research, Christianity has many reasons, whys, and schemes to put the birthright in the ownership of Judah, and how Jesus could come from the house of David, in spite of the curse placed in Jeremiah. But none of these contrived answers were acceptable to me. So I decided to turn to archaeology and see what its proofs and opinions were. The wealth of information I found there was almost overwhelming. Because this data is too large for one video, I will be brief and share only pieces of the information that led to my conclusions found at the end of this video. As well, I will provide the books that can be used to research the matter yourself. Let's begin. Abraham is said to have originally lived in Ur of the Chaldeans. However, Ur was not ruled by the Chaldeans until the 7th century BCE. Jacob and Esau would become two nations according to Genesis 25:23, with Esau being the nation of Edom, though archaeological investigations indicate that Edom reached statehood only under Assyrian approval in the 7th century BCE. Stories like that of Joseph and Moses reflect the understanding of kingdoms, rulers, and territories existing around the 7th century BCE. All the major places that play a role in the story of the wandering Israelites were inhabited in the 7th century BCE, and in some cases were inhabited only at that time. The 7th century knowledge applied to far older narratives of the Bible would continue in my search. Whoever was penning these stories were keenly aware of history in their own time, but lacked the historical information of the tales they were telling. This is where we must stop and understand that the Bible began to be penned in the Iron Age. The Bronze Age of the Earth is the period from 3500 BCE to 1200 BCE. The narratives of Adam, Noah, the Tower of Babel, Abraham, Jacob, and Moses takes place within this time of the Bronze Age. Proceeding forward, we will label these people and events as legendary. Not to say they are untrue, but because archaeological records do not align with the Bible until the time of King Omri in Samaria. Today, we have discovered what is called the Amarna letters, consisting of diplomatic correspondence between the Egyptian administration and its representatives in Canaan and Amurru, or neighboring kingdom leaders. According to these archaeological records, Egypt was still in control of Jerusalem in the time of the mid-1330s BCE, when Abdi-Heba was appointed mayor over the town. His letter, Amarna letter EA 287, calls for assistance from the Egyptian king, who had placed his name in Jerusalem forever. I sent as gifts to the king, my lord, prisoners 5,000, and 8 porters for the caravans of the king, my lord, but they have been taken in the countryside of Ayaluna. May the king, my lord, know that I am unable to send a caravan to the king. My lord, for your information, as the king has placed his name in Jerusalem forever, he cannot abandon it, the land of Jerusalem. The Amarna records reveal that Egypt had been protecting and watching over most of the lands that Joshua supposedly conquered during his crusade. Israel's earliest mention finally appears on the Merneptah stele, in which Pharaoh Merneptah claimed that, thanks to his military might, Israel had been completely wiped out. Canaan is captive with all woe. Ashkelon is conquered. Gezer seized. Yanom made non-existent. Israel is wasted. Its seed is no more. This was an obvious exaggeration, though we should note that the Bible makes no mention of Merneptah. The Bible does mention the Egyptian pharaoh Shishak in 1 Kings 14:25-27. According to the Bible, Jerusalem is attacked and robbed of its riches in the books of Kings. But Shishak is depicted on the temple of Amun in Kerak, which catalogs more than 150 towns and peoples that the Pharaoh conquered in the Levant, many from the kingdom of Israel. Yet none of them refer to Jerusalem or any place in the kingdom of Judah. As it appears, archaeology reveals that Shishak never stepped foot in the southern kingdom. According to the Deuteronomistic history of the Bible, a united monarchy existed under the reigns of David and Solomon. This study agrees with modern scholarship that there was likely never a united monarchy. There was instead the kingdom of Omri and the kingdom of David. King Omri and his dynasty building the much larger kingdom of the north, Israel of Samaria, and the much smaller kingdom of David existing in the southern kingdom of Judah. Two chosen kingdoms, two different sets of traditions, both serving the God Yahweh. Dated around 840 BCE, the Mesha's victory inscription offers a Moabite perspective on the history of this place. Author and scholar Jacob Wright writes, "The ruler recalls how he captured Nebo from Israel, slaughtering 7,000 men and offering the women and girls to his god Chemosh. He also tells how he deported Yahweh's sacred objects, which means that Yahweh must have had a sanctuary there." Mesha's reference to this deity, likely the oldest one in the historical record, provides another clue that the Omrides used Yahweh to consolidate their subjects. Although the Bible denounces Ahab for promoting the veneration of other gods, all our evidence suggests that he did much to establish Yahweh as the central deity of the kingdom. We know that he gave his sons Yahwistic names: Ahaziah, held by Yahweh, and Jehoram or Joram. Yahweh is exalted. As we have seen, he and his father appear to have built sanctuaries for Yahweh in the territories they occupied east of the Jordan. That they promoted Yahweh as the nation's chief deity does not mean that they excluded other gods. As Mesha did for the land of Moab with the deity Chemosh, the Omrides likely did for the land of Israel with Yahweh. And as in the case of Moab, the worship of other gods would have been tolerated alongside Yahweh. In 1975 through 1976, archaeologists working on an isolated fortress, Consolidation, in the northern Sinai desert discovered Hebrew writings related to Yahweh. The material finds and texts themselves suggest a direct link between this remote place and the northern kingdom. Scholars debate the date, but most are comfortable with the late 9th or early 8th century. That is, after the Omride effort to promote Yahweh worship. The Song of Deborah, which appears in Numbers 5:2-31, is considered by some scholars to be one of the oldest texts in the Bible. Dating this passage as far back as 1200 BCE, the song speaks as a victory hymn that lists the 10 tribes of Israel and omits Judah, Levi, and Simeon. In 1993, the Tel Dan stele was discovered. On this artifact, an unnamed king boasts of his victories over the king of Israel and his apparent ally, the king of the house of David. While the biblical account lambasts and condemns the Omride dynasty, history reveals a different story. Neil Asher Silberman and Israel Finkelstein write, "The existence of high places and other forms of ancestral and household god worship was not, as the Book of Kings imply, apostasy from an earlier, purer faith. It was part of the timeless tradition of the hill country settlers of Judah, who worshipped Yahweh along with a variety of gods and goddesses, known or adapted from the cults of neighboring peoples. Yahweh, in short, was worshipped in a wide variety of ways, and sometimes pictured as having a heavenly entourage. From the indirect and pointedly negative evidence of the books of Kings, we learn that priests in the countryside also regularly burned incense on the high places to the sun, the moon, and the stars. Since the high places were presumably open areas or natural hilltops, no definite archaeological traces of them have as yet been identified. So the clearest archaeological evidence of the popularity of this type of worship throughout the kingdom is the discovery of hundreds of figurines of naked fertility goddesses at every late monarchic site in Judah. More suggestive are the inscriptions found in the early 8th century site of Consolidation in northeastern Sinai, a site that shows cultural links with the northern kingdom. They apparently refer to the goddess Asherah as being the consort of Yahweh. And lest it be assumed that Yahweh's married status was just a sinful northern hallucination, a somewhat similar formula, speaking of Yahweh and his Asherah, appears in a late monarchic inscription from the Shephelah of Judah. This deep-rooted cult was not restricted to rural districts. There is ample biblical and archaeological information that the syncretistic cult of Yahweh flourished in Jerusalem even in late monarchic times. The condemnations of various Judahite prophets make it abundantly clear that Yahweh was worshipped in Jerusalem together with other deities, such as Baal, Asherah, the hosts of heaven, and even the national deities of the neighboring lands. From the biblical critique of Solomon, probably reflecting late monarchic realities, we learn of worship in Judah of Milcom of Ammon, Chemosh of Moab, and Ashtoreth of Sidon in 1 Kings 11:5 and 2 Kings 23:13. Jeremiah tells us that the number of deities worshipped in Judah equaled the number of its cities, and that the number of altars to Baal in Jerusalem equaled the number of bazaar stalls in the capital, Jeremiah 11:13. Moreover, cult objects dedicated to Baal, Asherah, and the host of heaven were installed in the temple of Yahweh in Jerusalem. Ezekiel 8 describes in detail all the abominations practiced in the temple in Jerusalem, including the worship of the Mesopotamian god Tammuz. Thus, the great sins of Ahaz and the other kings of Judah should not be seen as exceptional in any way. These rulers merely allowed the rural traditions to go unhampered. They and many of their subjects expressed their devotion to Yahweh in rites performed at countless tombs, shrines, and high places throughout the kingdom, with the occasional and subsidiary worship of other gods. The inscriptions appear to be scribal exercises, and several lines read, "I have blessed you by the Yahweh of Samaria." The references to the capital of the northern kingdom leave no doubt that many in Israel, especially elites, venerated Yahweh. However, this deity is not alone. He's accompanied by his Asherah. Asherah is a well-attested West Asian deity, as the consort of the highest god El, who presided over a larger pantheon. She occupied a position of prominence. In the Bible, she is often paired with Baal. Both El and Baal are attested in these inscriptions, with blessings pronounced in their names. However, Asherah is no longer El's or Baal's consort, but Yahweh's. The evidence suggests that in being promoted to Israel's national deity, Yahweh had usurped El's and Baal's place of honor in the pantheon. These finds are undeniably shocking and scandalous. The coupling of Yahweh with another deity flies in the face of the Bible's stringent requirements to worship Yahweh alone and its vehement opposition to the veneration of other gods. But then again, such stringency and vehemence would not have been necessary had this veneration not been widespread. The Bible admits as much, especially with regard to Asherah. According to the palace history, Ahab had set up her symbol in Samaria, and Jehu maintained it even after his political push and religious reforms, 1 Kings 16:33 and 2 Kings 13:6. For the reign of the Judean king Josiah, this history recounts a reform in 620 BCE in which the king removed Asherah's sacred vessels from the temple and destroyed a sector of the city where a guild of women wove her ritual garments. 2 Kings 23:4 and 7. Asherah worship was thus firmly entrenched in both Samaria and Jerusalem. What led to the banishment of this goddess was not some sort of entrenched macho opposition to a female deity in the societies of ancient Israel and Judah. After all, many macho cultures in antiquity, from Athens to Assyria, had goddesses as their chief deities. Moreover, Asherah had all along been only the consort, with limited power next to Yahweh, and by pairing her with Yahweh, not El. Worshippers were affirming Yahweh's preeminence. The biblical ban on worshiping Asherah along with other male deities was part of an effort to focus on a single transcendent entity that could unite the nation. If Yahweh were allowed to have a consort, then communities would continue thinking in terms of conventional Canaanite cosmologies, the intimate relationship between one people and one deity, which is foundational to the biblical concept of covenant, meant that the long-standing union between Yahweh and Asherah had to be dissolved. As they constructed this new covenantal order, the biblical authors annulled the union and envisioned a new marriage between Yahweh and Israel. The northern kingdom of Samaria, the Samaritans, the kingdom of Israel was likely never under one united monarch of the house of David. In 722 BCE, Assyria would destroy Samaria, deporting what some archaeologists believe was 10 to 20% of its citizens, and it is then that the kingdom of Judah would finally boom in population, size, and power. The kingdom of Israel would be scattered among Mesopotamian groups, merge with the southern tribe of Judah, but most citizens of the land would actually stay. Having now arrived in the 7th century BCE, we can now focus on the time in which archaeology shows the Bible was finally beginning to be penned. Next time, we will learn why the Bible contains political ambitions that sought to create the United Kingdom that was likely only a vision and a dream in the biblical story of King David and Solomon. These ambitions would blind the people and cause them to abandon the ancient paths of God, ways that would be revealed in the coming of his Messiah and Son, Jesus Christ.